request is June 1st, June 15th, July 6th, July 20th, August 3rd, and August 17th. Just looking ahead at June 15th is now the date for annual town meeting to start, with a rain date of June 22nd or June 29th. So we will meet and adjourn to town meeting on June 15th, but that's not a date that we can do more than that. So so that's probably our biggest thing to talk about, is just I would like to propose June 8th as potentially either the only or the second meeting date in June. And then I'll let you talk about July and August.
I'm okay with June 8th as a meeting date. Any other board members want to comment on that?
It's fine with me.
Rachel?
Yep.
Sorry.
I'm good.
All right, so take a vote. Go ahead, Dave.
Andrew, it looks, I have on my calendar, there's a public forum on sustainable transportation that night at 7. No, Jenny is shaking her head.
Yeah, we won't be having a forum that evening. We are planning virtual engagement events for the Sustainable Transportation Plan, but that evening is no longer, that was when we thought we would be able to have a meeting in person. We're not going to be doing that, unfortunately. But we will make an announcement about when those engagements will occur, but it won't be June 8th.
Okay. I think it'd be fine with adding that meeting if somebody wants to make a motion.
So motioned.
Second.
All in favor of adding that meeting? I'll just do by roll call. Ken?
Aye.
Jean?
Yes.
David?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
I vote yes, so there we go, meeting June 8th. So,
Is that going to be at 7 p.m.?
that'll be at 7 p.m. Yeah, we'll continue meetings at 7 p.m. so long as we're going to be doing them remotely. If and when we return to in-person meetings, we can revisit the time of those.
So the meeting that was set for June 1st and 15th is changed to the 8th, right?
Jenny?
Is June 1st still a meeting date? I mean, you didn't take it off. So I think you're still meeting on June 1st, and you've added June 8th and June 15th as annual town meeting.
All right. Part of the reason we're adding June 8th is I expect to continue some hearings this evening that will need to be discussed shortly. So now,
Andrew,
go ahead, Jenny.
do you wish to keep the July and August meetings as they are right now? Or?
That's where I was headed next. Yes. We can revisit taking those off the calendar at some future date. We can do that administratively. I'm okay with taking them off, just not adding them without the consent of the other board members.
What I wanted to mention is that in July, at some point, we will have a joint meeting with the select board again. I don't yet have the date of that, but as you recall from the conversation back in February, we said that we would have some sort of joint planning meeting in July. Mm-hmm. So when I have a better sense of that date, I'll provide it to you.
Great.
We'll go from there. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So that should take care of that agenda item, Jenny, unless there's anything else there that needs to be talked about or covered.
No, thank you.
Okay. Good. Good. So moving on, as I said, I'm going to be taking the public hearings a little bit out of order this evening. The director can get into this a little bit. She received a call from Bob Anesi, who is the attorney for the applicant for 882 Mass Ave, who apparently, after hearing the outcry over the proposed plans, to put it one way, and taking these things into consideration, has chosen to ask us for a continuance and both literally and figuratively go back to the drawing board. I think that's wise. I think both the board and the public probably would have had a lot to say about that potential design, particularly the removal of local businesses, which is a really unfortunate thing for the town, and certainly not the way I want to see things redeveloped. Typically, in my mind, things should be left better than they started and not take a step back, even in the name of so-called progress. I do like the idea of the housing that they were headed toward. I think that one bedrooms and studio apartments are lacking in town. They can contribute to the housing stock without contributing to a drain on services we've heard complaints about. I'm happy that they were including affordable housing in those plans. But again, I'm not happy that there was a displacement of 4 local businesses, several of which serve much more than just that adjacent neighborhood, one of which particularly offers a lot to the town. Without naming names, I think we can read between the lines. So I will allow the other members of the board to chime in on this. We'll go down the line. But to the members of the public, I will say that this is an occasion where I think we are all on the same page about where a project was headed. And I'm hoping that the applicant can come back with something more appropriate for that location. And communicated through Jenny that some additional talks are needed as those plans come forth to meet those goals. So what we'll be doing is voting on a continuance to a future date, which may be that June 8th date. It may be a date in July. We'll get back to Jenny on that, excuse me. But Ken, I'll give you the first crack at that.
Well, I concur with you as far as postponing this hearing, but since we already, I think I could speak, not gonna speak for the other board members, but I spent quite a bit of time reviewing what's been submitted, and I think I would like to share some of the my thoughts on what's going on there, just so that they have an idea what we're looking at as they go back to the boards, so they say. So if you don't mind, if you don't mind you spending a few minutes just talking about it in a brief general way, I'm not going to get into specifics. I think you already touched on.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second. Just do need to formally open the public hearing, which is docket number 3625. So that's open. Go ahead, Ken.
All right. I totally agree with you that the proportions of the commercial space and the housing is not the right proportion. There should be more commercial space on the ground floor. I think I wouldn't mind talking to the other board members in the hearing, saying like I think I'm willing to look at maybe reducing some of the parking so that there could be more ground floor commercial space, and eliminating some of the ground floor units, which I don't think are that desirable, facing the back of a parking lot. Those are some of the things that I was looking at. Also, I want the architect to look at the way they view this building on the lot. It's actually a corner lot, and their side view, the side elevation facing Lockland Ave, looks like a side view to like an alley or something. It's not a front elevation. I think they should look at that more closely, since it's at a pretty predominant corner that you'll see going either way on Mass Ave. And I think it's a simple move that they just take those units that's there and flip it, and have the kitchen and bathroom against the stairs, and have the living room facing out to an exterior wall, which allows them to put more windows in. Little things like that. And also when they resubmit, I strongly suggest that they should show the site plan with the surrounding buildings. It's kind of deceptive, but there's a huge building right behind them off to the right, if you're looking at it from Mass Ave. And it's only like 4 or 5 feet from the property line. I mean, did they block windows or light or something? We don't really know how that works in conjunction. And I think it'd be a better way of viewing the elevation with the other elevations of the street, including the single-family houses behind it, so we know how it steps back and so forth. It's just sticking it in more context would be better. They should also show any mechanical equipment on the roof, the elevator override. They're not showing any trees out in the street. I know there's trees out there, maybe not as many as we want, but we wouldn't mind talking about adding some trees. They're putting in re-putting in some sidewalk and a curb cut. I think we also should look into relocating that curb cut so it's safer. The curb cut right now is so far back in that corner that as you're driving, I guess, inbound on Mass Ave, and you're at the curb cut, any car that's parked on the street on Mass Ave blocks that view. You don't see anything. So I think we should take a little more time and look at how we place that curb cut. There's other little small stuff there, but I think that was the major stuff that I want to talk about to share with them, so that at least when they go back to the drawing boards, they can take some of this into consideration if they want to.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. And Jenny, if there's an opportunity for any of the members of the board to meet with the applicant appropriately as they work on these revisions, I think that would probably be welcome and wise. Jean, did you have anything you wanted to share on this before we go to next step here?
I'll just be very brief. I had many concerns about the project also, some of which both of you articulated. I think, and the only two big things that I'll add is I was unclear about whether they were going to end up narrowing the sidewalk or not, and I would have concerns if they were going to narrow the sidewalk. So that's one piece. And the second is, I think when they redo the project, they should redo it so they have enough landscaped and usable open space.
I agree. Open space is something that I'm concerned with.
I also just will add, I agree that it didn't seem as if there was enough commercial space, and I would like to see them get a parking reduction in exchange for additional affordable units, which we have the authority to do under the zoning bylaw.
Great.
So I would like to tie those two together, or at least have them consider it. I'd also like them to consider doing much better in LEED than they're proposing. I'd also like them to consider a solar roof, and I'd like them to consider at least one electric charging station in the parking lot.
Okay, thanks, Gene.
Those are the big things.
All right, David, go ahead.
Those are all great comments from Gene, and I'll endorse them. In addition, I'll just echo what the others have said, that the loss of commercial space, particularly where they were businesses serving the surrounding neighborhood, was unfortunate, and I'd really like them to think hard about how to maintain, if not increase, the amount of commercial space available on that block in a form that meets modern needs, since as currently configured, it's a much older building with an older layout. I'd also like them to be sure when they come back that they have paid closer attention to our zoning bylaw. And I won't get into specifics on that, but I think there were a number of things that were not clearly in compliance with our bylaw, and potentially things they were looking for relief on that we may not be able to grant them relief on. As well, they missed the mark with bicycle parking, both as to the amount of bicycle parking, and from what I could see, the racks that they were proposing were also not in compliance with our zoning bylaw and the bike parking guide. It was also unclear to me what was going on with the sidewalk width, and that's a very important aspect. So I will repeat that one as that Jean covered. And when they do think about rebuilding or redesigning rather, if there's any way to incorporate any aspects of that existing structure or some of the look and feel on the ground level of that structure as it exists in the neighborhood now, that might be an interesting approach. So those were my general comments.
Thanks, David. Rachel, go ahead.
I certainly won't belabor any of the comments that my colleagues have made. I agree that there are a lot of challenges with the project as proposed, specifically the lack of real usable commercial space in a supposedly mixed-use development. I just also add to what they've stated that I'd really like them to take a look at the materials proposed specifically, including much more articulation than they had proposed in the form of the flat panels and very flat facade materials in their initial proposal.
Thanks. Yeah, I think these are all good points. I should ask, is the applicant on? Bob, are you here with us this evening? I don't see your name in the list here. All right, I have to take that as a no. Any of these call-in users, etc. So.
I don't know if there's any other person related to this.
Yeah, I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in the list. But I would really like to see a transcript of these comments, however it might be delivered to Attorney Anesi, so that he and his applicant can understand where the board is coming from. I am still going to allow public comment. This is a public hearing, but I thought it was important that sort of these general comments, without knowing what the plans look like when they come back in whenever that may be, we can at least give them some guidance from here as to what might be a more successful, welcomed project. And to me, as I said before, like the idea of redevelopment is taking something that exists and improving it. And just because it's new doesn't always mean it's an improvement. And the same token, just because it's old doesn't mean it needs to be kept. But in a lot of ways, this seems like a step back for the neighborhood, for that corner of Mass Ave, and for the folks that live and work there. And I would like to see something done about the commercial space that's being taken away. Yeah, there's not much. There's nothing that the ARB can do as far as private contractual relationships between the landlord and the tenants that are there, aside from voice our displeasure and make that known. It's really disappointing to see things taken away. You look at the mixed use applications that have come before us over the last several years, and the three that have ultimately come to fruition, we've officially voted on 4. 3 have actually been developed or in various stages of construction. And we could disagree on aesthetics, but each of those has taken truly blighted property and markedly improved it, whether adding commercial space or additional housing options or affordable housing, and not taking anything away from what's already there. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we explore this option. Mixed use has been in place since 2016, but it's not something that's been used a whole lot in the last 4 years to really get anywhere. And the intent when it was put in place was certainly not to take things away. So Bob, I'm told that you're on. I'll give you.
I had trouble getting in. I'm sorry. Okay, but I am on. Yeah, my position was going to be that I was going to be asking that the public hearing be continued. We have we've had a lot of comments come in over the weekend, and we had comments from planning as well that was included in the planning department report that we got on Friday. We'd like to take a look at those issues, see what we can do to address some of those issues. So my intent at the outset was to request that the public hearing itself be continued, okay? It seems to me that there's been discussion while I couldn't get on, my fault, not yours, okay, already about the project. So Andrew, can you tell me where we are on that? Are we talking about continuing the public hearing, or just what are we doing at this point?
So the hearing, I have opened the hearing. I let it be known that you requested a continuance. The board
All right.
has weighed in.
Okay. All right.
Said, and I think what would be wise is for you and your client to work with Jenny.
Yep.
On sitting down with Ken or Rachel.
Yep.
Because they're the builders and the architects on the board to try to formulate.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Andy. Could you speak up?
Formulate a plan that might be a little bit more well received.
Yeah. And I certainly am not adverse to that, okay? Can I make a few comments, or should I not do that?
I'll leave it to your discretion.
Say again? At my discretion, okay. We are in a B2 zone for sure, okay? It is mixed use, and I understand from comments coming in that the folks would like to see, even planning, would like to see more of a commercial component with respect to the building, and we're certainly looking at that. With respect to whether the building comes down or doesn't come down, I think importantly, we should know that we have a phase 3 contamination study, and that phase 3 contamination study basically has told us where the contamination had emanated from. It had emanated from the site, and it crossed Mass Ave. Now, when we take the entire building down, we're going to go to phase 4. Now, we can't go to phase 4, I don't believe, until we take the entire building down so that we can take away any of the remnants of the contaminated soil that remain at the property from that chlorine contamination. That's one of the reasons why we're proposing that the building come down. There was an EDR case back in 1988 that talked about building on top of the existing retail stores, but at that point in time, there may not well have been a contaminated site as there is now. The client has spent extensive monies with respect to dealing with the contamination issue, and as I've indicated, the only way that we effectively can do that, in our opinion, and I just want to make this clear, is to take the building down in its entirety and put up a new building. We have comments from folks who are indicating that they want to see more of a commercial unit, commercial component, and we're certainly willing to consider that, but we also would want the board to consider the fact that the B2 zone there is an orphan zone, okay? Because there's other zones around it. Right next door to the B2 zone is an R zone, a high R zone, with 4 floors, I believe, or perhaps even more, of 33 residential units. So one of the thoughts we had in terms of taking the building down and putting up residential units was that we would be consistent with the character of that building next door. I know there have been comments from tenants about the idea that they are being compelled to leave and the like. The information I have from my client is to the contrary. The information I have from my client is that that is not the case at all, that all of the leases that exist at the property have expired. And indeed, she has taken no steps to evict anyone. She couldn't do that anyone now with the corona crisis, the emergency crisis, but she's not even doing that. And what she is doing is she's been dealing with tenants, existing tenants, for the purpose of talking with them about coming up with alternative space in other buildings that the Piscuto family owns in Arlington. So those talks are ongoing. I know that. Some of the issues that, and they will continue to be ongoing. She will do the best she can to try to accommodate these folks. But again, for folks to say that she's evicting people or that they have a lease that goes on for the next 10 or 15 years, that simply is not true. She's given me information on all of the tenants, and she's assured me that the leases on all of the tenants are ended at this point. We take cognizant of the comments made about buffering, about the buffer between the property and the residential property to the rear. We accept the comments on that. We also accept the comments on the 20-foot side yard, and we're looking at that as well. That's something we're focusing on. The reason we want the 22 units is because we feel that the 22 residential units are more marketable from the point of view of the owner, but also the governor himself has indicated that we should have more residential units in the town. The converting the property to residential units and with some commercial component as well will be a furtherance of that objective on the part of the governor, and I think also a furtherance of some objectives on the part of the town as well. That's the reason we're coming in with the idea that we would like to have 22 units, 3 of which would be smaller units, okay, studio type units. Again, we're going to go to school on the comments that have been made, okay, and come back at the next hearing date with changes with respect to our plans. But we're hoping that the board is not going to be asking us to completely redraw our plans with respect to the concept that we're putting forth in terms of a residential component and as well as a commercial component, understanding that there'll be some comments and some pushback with respect to more commercial components as far as the building is concerned. But again, I just want to leave with the board the idea that we would very much like to pursue the plan, the concept of the plans we have proposed. I certainly would have no problem meeting with Ken or Rachel, Andrew, whoever you suggest, okay, in that regard for the purpose of going over the plans, getting feedback as I've done with the Atwood House, okay, and coming back with something that perhaps makes sense for the members of the board and makes sense for the members of the town as well. That basically is where I'm coming from at this point. But I just ask you all to keep an open mind with regard to what we're proposing. I don't think we're proposing anything that is alien to the neighborhood, okay? I think that, and again, I'm going to suggest to you that the B2 zone is an anomaly. The B2 zone is an orphan. It shouldn't even be where it is, okay? And unfortunately, what happened years ago is town meeting did what they did, and they rezoned that area, and they left the B2 zone hanging out there by its fingertips, okay? So we're dealing with that at this point in terms of trying to come up with a proposal that makes sense for the town and makes sense for the board. That's pretty much what I wanted to say without getting into details as far as our plans and the like. Okay.
Thanks, Bob. And I look forward to working with you and having other members of the board and staff input.
Yeah. And you know me, I want to work with the board, okay? I don't want to be, antagonistic to the board in terms of what they're looking for as well, okay? So I'm looking for some guidance too at this point. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
all right?
and Bob, I appreciate that. Thanks for calling in and thanks for the things that you had to say.
Yep. Yep.
We'll make sure that you get some sort of idea of where the board is coming from on this and that you can
All right. Okay.
get access to this. I see Jean's hand up, and then just because this is a public hearing, I think we would have been continuing it anyway based on what we saw earlier. So I'm glad to have you come in and tell us that this is going to change drastically, I hope.
Yeah.
I see Jean's hand up. I'm going to let Jean speak. I'll give the other members of the board one more opportunity to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. One of the things I didn't say before, because I didn't know you were on, Bob, and I'm glad you mentioned the site remediation, because I was looking for, I'd read a lot of the materials that had been submitted to DEP about the site.
Sounds good.
And what I'm hoping that you can provide next time is a proposed timeline to get through phase 4 and get a closeout of that, so we can see what that's going to be and how that will mesh with your proposed timeline for the, I guess, demolition and construction of a new building there. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other board members wish to speak? Rachel?
Unmuted, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Was that? I'm not sure who that was speaking.
We haven't opened it up to the public yet. And if we do, we need people to raise their hand to get called on.
Yeah, I will let everyone speak. I will turn your video on, so the spotlight will be on you. But I just ask you to bear with us until the board has finished with its piece with Mr. Nessie. So if any other board members have something to say, please go ahead. All right.
Andrew, I'd be willing to sit down with Bob and his client to review interim plans if he wishes.
Good.
Like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Rachel, David, Jean, anything else? All right. So hopefully, I know we have a lot of other people in the room this evening. So there's a little bit of a learning curve as we move through this size. There is an option on your screens, if you're using the video option, to raise your hand. Please do so. We'll unmute you, turn on your camera, and allow you to speak. I'll go through as I see hands up. If you're on the phone, I'm not completely familiar with how that works, but I know there's a way to go to raise your hand with the keypad. Will allow you to speak. I know there's a lot of controversy over this project. I think you've heard that the board is unhappy with what's been put forth, and that the applicant is going to change their plans. So I'd ask that you not respond to what you've already seen necessarily, and not to go down the rabbit hole of speculation. This is that kind of meeting where that can run rampant, but be respectful. Remember that we're still on video. We're still in a public hearing. You're still being recorded. And I hope you'll behave yourselves the way you would in a public meeting. So Steve Revelak, I'm going to allow you to go first. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Steve Revelak, 111 Sunnyside Avenue. I'd like to concur with a number of the comments that you yourself made. Particularly, I think it would be nice to retain a full first floor of commercial space. I'm also heartened by something that Mr. Anise said earlier. We're next door to this building is a 5-floor, 33-unit apartment building. And to be perfectly honest, when I saw when I first saw the proposal, I thought, cool, this is something just like I wanted to see something like the apartment next to it, and I'm really glad to hear that Mr. Anise his client is considering something along, similar massing in that would complement it. So overall, I am glad to see a proposal for more housing, particularly single bedroom and studios, because we have a real need for housing in general, and that type in particular is lacking in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Carl Wagner is up next. Give me a second to unmute you, Carl. Go ahead.
All right. Hi, I'm Carl Wagner. I live in Arlington. I just wanted to, hopefully you can hear me and see me. Getting a little alert.
Yeah, could you just say, I know you said your name, could you just, and that you live in Arlington. We just need your address for the record, please.
Sure, I'm Carl Wagner. I live at 30 Edgehill Road in Arlington. I appreciate the words that the board members have made concerning the proposed development. And I'd just like to add that there are a lot of people here, and they're here, I think, because the concern is looking at the building across the street from this proposed development. People are concerned that they're going to get something like that. And I know that this board feels rightly that they did a lot to improve the building across the street, the one next to AHS. But people feel that that is not what we were hoping when 2016 town meeting approved the mixed use law. And I really think people listening to this today should ask, should the mixed use law be changed if we're going to get units like this? Arlington needs more support for our retail, our existing businesses. Arlington needs retail that people around those businesses can go out and get food from or buy something like a hardware item. Arlington doesn't need more luxury apartments and condominiums that raise the average rent for people and increase the property taxes for everybody. I guess that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Christian Klein. Hang on, Christian. Go ahead, Christian. You should be up now.
Thank you. Christian Klein, 54 Newport Street. I just wanted to confirm that written comments were going to be forwarded at this stage to the developer for inclusion.
They will be. They've been made part of the record. They're available on our website, and we'll be sure to give them to Attorney Anisi.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And thank you for those written comments as well, Christian. I thought those were well thought out.
Thank you.
Jim Kempf. Go ahead, Mr. Kempf.
Okay, I'm unmuted there.
You're unmuted.
Yes, Jim Kempf at 900 Mass Ave, so just a couple doors down from this proposed project. I really like a lot of the comments from the board members and the last speaker, last couple of speakers, but I'd also like to point out a couple of points that I haven't heard much about. One, 22 units, single units, we're talking 22 cars. I see a plan with a big parking lot in there. That's a lot of traffic we're adding at a corner where we have hundreds of high school kids every morning lining up to cross that street and go to school there. Oddly, maybe it's somewhere in the plan, it's 85 pages long, I don't know. But in the drawings of the building, I don't even see the bus stop anymore. That's a highly used bus stop by kids at the Gibbs, kids at the middle school, kids coming to the high school, daily. People going to the grocery store, and that's, I think, an issue. Another key thing that really bothers me a bit is that we're building all the way to the sidewalk whenever these new buildings go up. It's the same with the one across the street, a little bit down the street on the other side of Shop and Stop. And there's just, there's an absence of green. I applaud the board members for mentioning that. But we give up quite a bit. We're going to have this beautiful new high school where we've already agreed to sacrifice some of the green there, and we can't have any, along the way. I think it's part of the town character that is a problem, and it's something that we give up when we build to the edge, when we build with materials, which again, one of the board members mentioned this, that just, it looks like, frankly, I know we don't want to be too critical here, but it's a bit of a piece of plastic. And, next door we have this beautiful brick building that will now be hidden from view. And it matters for the long-term view. what we leave is the aesthetic. And that's, I think, something that we have to consider. You know, this is a building that's going to be there for decades. And we have to, you know, I don't know how much power the town has to influence, but it's now or never. And I really hope we take these things into consideration. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. Michael Ruderman. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 brief comments. I am heartened by the board's response to the initial plans in that there needs to be a lot of work done. And I would underline the portion of the board's comments where it was asked that the next time this matter comes before the board, we have accurate site plan and 3-dimensional representations to show the surrounding buildings. They are material. The setbacks and the surrounding neighborhood have a great deal to do with how the public perceives the new design of whatever is to come. Second comment, I heard it said tonight that all leases have expired within the building. That is not true. I come to you tonight as the treasurer of Arlington Community Media, ACMI. We have a property there that we have leased since 2012. We call it our Studio B. It is where we have taught high school age students to produce television content and where it is broadcast from. Our lease has not expired. We have a lease that runs through, I believe, August. We have 2 more renewals on that lease for a period of 3 years each. We could be there for another 6 years under the existing conditions of that lease. Like I said, we've been there since 2012 with a lease that takes us through 2026. We thought we were justified in investing a large sum of money. Our executive director has estimated it to be $70,000 in build out and technological additions to that property to turn it into a television studio, which we thought was a prudent investment given the length of our lease, which I will reiterate has not expired. Third point, the contamination that was referred to previously. We were not aware of any contamination on this site when we let the property in 2012. We were only informed of this, to our knowledge, for the first time a couple of months ago when we were told that the existing contamination would trigger the condemnation clause in our lease and cause us to have to leave the premises. So I find three things that are material to my contribution here tonight on the record as the treasurer of ACMI. 1, I echo the board's dissatisfaction with the plans described so far. 2, not all leases have come to an end. ACMI still has a lease. 3, we have serious questions about the extent, the length, the duration, the incidence of the contamination, which we are now just finding out about. That's all I have.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate those comments. Thank you. Patrice Smith. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Patrice Smith. I live at 10 Lockland Avenue. So I live across the street from the property that is being considered for redevelopment. I've got a number of concerns, and I will try to be brief. What I plan to do is send an email to this group, and I will iterate all of them. But in the interest of time, the things that I would like to talk about are the height of the building and what kind of a shadow it will cast. I'm interested in groundwater studies. I don't know if people are aware, but the houses in this neighborhood are in a high water mark, and our basements regularly take on water. So I'm very interested in whether there will be an impact for that for the folks in the neighborhood. I'm also interested in traffic impact studies. If anybody's been on this street from 7:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock in the morning during drop-off for the high school, people will realize that it's deadlock. It's very difficult to get down the street. So I want to make sure that we consider that as well. And then finally, the setback. From what I looked at, I did not understand what the setback proposed was going to be. And as somebody else said, I want to make sure that we've got enough setback from the street and not emulating what happened in the property across the street on the corner of, I forget what's basically between the high school, next to Mystic Wine. You know which one I'm talking about. Because that property does not have enough of a setback. So I've got a number of, a few other concerns. The groundwater study is a big one for me. If my basement is going to get wet more often, we've got a big problem. We've already done what we can to mitigate it. We've put in French drains. We've got a sump pump going, but it can only take on so much. And during a heavy rainstorm, our basement will take on water. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Is there any other member of the public who'd like to raise their hand and speak right now? All right.
Andrew, I think that everybody can unmute themselves, so the people on the phone might not know how to raise their hand. So just to reiterate that, and then also to tell people to send comments directly to me, and I will share them with the board. And that also I have already shared with the applicant all of the comments that have been received so far, except for anything that I received perhaps in the last 2 hours.
I know we've received a number of comments. Those up through late this afternoon have been made public. They will continue to be made public and taken into consideration, both by this board and I trust by the applicant. So, Jenny, how do we go about letting people who've called in speak? We haven't had to deal with this issue yet.
I think just if you've called in and you're just on the phone right now, if you wish to speak, you just need to unmute yourself. You have the ability to do that on your own because you might not know how to raise your hand. So
I see a phone number ending in 303 that I think wishes to speak. So please announce yourself and go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, 303. You're on.
You're on.
Oh, you finally unmuted me? Hello?
Your turn in the queue to speak, Mr. Warden. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you. We've been trying to turn on the Zoom thing for the past 50 minutes, and we can't get it to come up. It won't ask for the meeting ID number and stuff. And so I don't think it's really a fair public meeting if we're not allowed to see it and hear it. I mean, we're being excluded because of your technology. Hello?
Okay, so we're discussing 882, 892 Mass Ave right now, Mr.
Yes,
Warden.
I know what you're discussing. I've been listening on the phone to it, and I'm glad to see that you picked up on some of the comments that have come in, that there's not enough commercial space, and that the fear that I enunciated at town meeting, that they would build a high-rise building with a nice street wall and one little shop in the corner is not to the liking of the board. That is a relief to hear that, and I hope you will continue in that vein. And I mean, Mr. Nessie tried to sort of back and fill and say, well, don't make me change it too much and all this stuff. Minimum, it seems to me the ground floor ought to be commercial, and that seems to be something that the board members were working towards, or some of them were anyway. And I think that was what the way mixed use was sold to town meeting. So I hope it continues in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Any other members who'd like to join in via phone? You unmute yourself, just announce yourself. We'll do our best to give you the opportunity to speak. I understand that that's not the most ideal way to participate right now, unfortunately, with
Andrew, there seems to be someone, Michael Alexander, who's waving their hands.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Alexander.
Oh, it's Mrs. Alexander.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. My name is Judy Alexander, and I'm at 6th Highland. I have a very basic question, which is what is going to happen with traffic patterns when both the high school and this project come on at the same time and construction is just rampant.
I think that's a concern that we'll have to deal with the applicant, but I do appreciate that that idea. It's definitely something that we're concerned about as these plans go in and the construction schedule is formulated. Thank you. Bob, do you have an answer to that? Do you want to respond?
They're going to look at. That is something we're certainly going to look at. Okay, and I thank you for that comment. We will address that when we come back for the next hearing for sure. Okay, and the other thing I want to comment on, if I could, is that lease situation. I will get a copy of that and take a look at that myself. Okay, but the information I received was to the contrary. I will read the lease, and whatever the lease says, that's what I'm going to believe. All right.
And I just want to say right now, and for future hearings, I am well aware that there is a dispute, we'll call it, over the terms of the lease and what each side control or say over contracts between private parties. So if there is an issue there, there are other much more appropriate ways to resolve that. I don't want to have that get into a back and forth between you and members of the public.
I understand, but I simply want to know for my own information.
That comment is directed to anyone who might want to speak.
Yeah. Sure.
This is not an appropriate venue to hash out a lease dispute.
Yeah.
So.
There is another individual.
I see Norman McLeod, so I will go ahead, Mr. McLeod.
Hi, I'm Norm McLeod. I'm the Executive Director for Arlington Community Media. My address is 77 Tanager Street in Arlington. I just want to support the comments that Michael Ruderman had made before. And no, I will not get into the lease question. I'm sure Mr. Anisi can follow through on that. We can talk offline, so to speak. My two comments here. One is that in my world, that lease was long enough to the point where we are looking for another place to go to. We understood that the lease was going to be close. Aside from that, we have an issue where we have a $70,000 build-out studio with current up-to-date equipment, cutting edge as the phrase goes, and we just can't go into a storefront or wherever where Frank or his daughter decide that they want to suggest for us. So we have an issue along those lines. There's a time factor involved here. And that time factor really, hopefully, will go through August into September if we have to, until we can find a place where we can go and we can transport all of our equipment and our ceiling and the walls and the doors, even if we have to, because they're all soundproof doors, specialized equipment. We have to find a place for all of that to go without spending about more $70,000 or more.
I don't want to interrupt you. I read a number of comments about the use of that studio there. And again, we, this board can't enforce anything, but I would strongly, it would do the applicant some good if they could work something out with you folks in the short term.
I'm more than willing to do that. Certainly we haven't had no contact with them, and that's part of my concern. So if we can move forward and have contact and negotiate, I'm more than happy to do that. Just one last comment. When the letter came to us concerning this question of the building being raised, there was nothing attached to it in terms of documentation to show that this building was supposed to be raised because of the EPA or environmental question. I know that 3 years ago, there was a test in the studio of air quality and it failed. 2 years ago, it was retested and it passed. Then we received a letter saying we have to leave because the building is going to be raised. It's a curious situation. I'd like to make that one comment. I'd like to see documentation.
All right, I'll let you work that out with Mr. Anisi offline. Thank you. I appreciate the comments. All right, is there anyone else before we turn this back to the board who wishes?
Hi. Marina Darlow here. Hi, I'm from 6 Clark, so across the street from the potential hotel. I just want to echo the concerns that my neighbors raised to ensure, maybe if they're repeated by enough people, they will carry more weight. Main concern is traffic, water study, and the fact that there's not enough offset from the street. I personally, I don't want to look into the hotel windows.
So, just to interrupt you, we're not talking about the hotel right now.
Oh, apologies, I joined late. Okay, so that's it. So my comments all pertain to the hotel on the corner of Mass Ave.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right, so we'll continue to accept written comments as soon as we receive some updated plans. Those will go online for review by the board, by the public. I would encourage, again, I think there's a willingness to work with the board on something that may be appropriate for this site. So I think it's a
We have a date for a continuance?
About to ask Mr. Anesi for one.
All right. I was initially thinking June 8, okay, but listening to all the comments, and particularly, I want to have that meeting with Kin. I think that's going to be pretty beneficial, but I want Kin to meet with my architect and my site guy as well. I want all of those people to participate in that meeting. So I'm probably I'm going to be asking for a longer time. I would suggest if we could get June 29 rather than the date I was going to ask for, June 8, that might be more relevant and more appropriate.
Jenny, is that an appropriate date?
June 29th. Yes.
Yeah. No, Mr. was during our earlier conversation. I just want to make sure that that's.
Yeah, it's basically, town meeting is June 15th with rain dates on the 22nd and I believe 29th. So I cannot say definitively that will not end up being a date that ends up becoming town meeting.
Okay.
We might need to change it again, but
I didn't have us having a meeting on the 29th of June.
Yeah, I thought July 6th was our next date after June 8th.
Oh, that's what I have, July 6th.
yeah, you'd be backtracking and adding another meeting. So if you choose the 29th, that's a date that you would need to add as a meeting.
Bob, how do you feel about July 6th?
Yep, July 6th.
July 6th instead of June 29? Hello?
Yes.
Gene, are you saying July 6th rather than June 29?
Yes, June 29th
Okay.
is one of the rain dates for town meeting.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, if July 6th is the date that the board feels is most appropriate for them, then I think I have to defer to the board.
Okay. Let's, all right, so I'll take a motion to continue public hearing, special permit docket 3625 to July 6th, 2020, 7 p.m.
So motioned.
Second.
All in favor? Ken?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Jean?
Yes.
Aye.
Rachel? And I vote yes. So Bob, we'll see you on the 6th.
Okay.
I look forward to what you have to give us.
Okay, thank you very much, all. Yep.
And
Yep.
Jenny and Ken will be in touch about that offline meeting, see where we can
Yep.
go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so
Yep.
that matter is continued to July 6th, 7 p.m. Soon we'll still be on Zoom at that point. All right, moving on. Thanks everyone for your patience. We have a brief sign hearing, docket 2818 for 880 Mass Ave. This is a continued public hearing. Special permit docket 2818 by Back Bay Signs. I think we have, so I think Jay Perillo is our guy. Can you tell us what you've come back with? I think you've responded to our concerns from the last hearing.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so we've changed the directional sign, which is sign E05 in the sign package, to a size that conforms with the bylaw as requested by the board. This is now a 1.99 square foot sign that is 3 feet off the ground.
Okay. I don't have any questions or concerns about this. I think it answers the questions we asked Mr. Perillo to come back with after our last hearing. I'll go down the line for members of the board. Rachel, I believe this is the one you had to recuse yourself from.
Correct.
All right. So Jean,
I have no concerns.
Kin,
No, I have no concerns.
David,
No further questions.
Jenny, anything to add before I see whether there's public comment?
No, thank you.
All right. Any members of the public wish to speak to the TD Bank sign? Going once. All right. All right. So I would suggest we vote to approve this package as amended with the conditions in the director's report.
So moved.
Second.
All right. We'll go on voice vote here. Kin?
Aye.
Jean?
Yes.
David?
Aye.
Rachel?
Abstain.
Thank you. I vote yes. So thank you, Mr. Perillo. Thanks for coming back and your patience through that first hearing. Thanks for your help. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
All right.